Behold how good, how wonderful it is to be together in person, as well as for those who are streaming with us. Welcome as well. Hine matov umanayim, shevet achim gam yachad. The words from the Psalms are found on page 128. Shevet achim gam yachad, Hinei matov umanayim. Shevet achim gam yachad, Hinei matov umanayim. Shevet achim gam yachad, Hinei matov umanayim. Shevet achim gam Shevet achim gam yachad, Hinei matov umanayim. Shevet achim gam yachad. Shabbat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Michael Feshbach. I'm delighted to be joined tonight by Jeff Swat and Max Morrison. And the young woman who was standing next to me last week will be back on other occasions. Nez Huckleby will be with us perhaps twice a month and during the high holidays in a role of cantorial soloist. So I was very relieved that she was able to be here last week and look forward to many occasions on the Bima with her as well. We welcome Shabbat with light and with warmth. Candles will be lit this night by Susan Solars. The introduction, I was told you knew that. This was not meant to be a drive-by honor. Sorry, Susan. Page 121 for the English before, and the blessing itself will be on page 120. Sorry if you didn't. Well, Susan and Bruce helped host the Shabbat dinner earlier, so. Custom here is to rise. Please rise. When you are ready, please be seated. The Torah portion this Shabbat, we begin this week with Parshat Devarim. I will touch base on one aspect of the weekly portion, but I wanted to share one thing with you. On other occasions, perhaps in the setting of Torah study on Shabbat morning, once we start up again, I will share more with you, but the book of Deuteronomy changed my life. It was my junior year of college. I was spending it in Israel at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and I wanted to be a writer. I dreamed of being a science fiction writer. Some of my congregants have always told me my sermons are fantasy. I don't know if they meant it as a compliment or not. But I figured a writer should know the Bible, so I took a class called Introduction to the Hebrew Bible. Well, the Hebrew University is not, of course, a yeshiva. It's a modern university. So it taught the Introduction to the Hebrew Bible from the point of view of modern biblical scholarship. It was not based on the assumption that God wrote the Torah and gave it to Moses on Mount Sinai, with Moses writing all of it down, including the description at the end of Deuteronomy of his own funeral, which tradition says he's writing down as he's crying, or some Orthodox Jews say maybe Joshua wrote the last chapter. But this was the point of view that human beings wrote the Bible over time with different motives, and it was woven together later as a unitary document, but its origin was multiple sources. This argument was so compelling that I had 5 Orthodox Jews who had taken that class who, when presented with this material, became atheists. I was raised as a Reformed Jew, so it was not utterly shocking to me, but when I encountered the notion that human beings wrote the Bible yearning for God, and the book of Deuteronomy and the structure and how it's structured and why it was written and when it was written is at the center of that insight. When I encountered that notion that human beings wrote the Bible, it made me religious. So I will tell you that story another time. Last week we introduced the opening psalm of Kabbalat Shabbat. Kabbalat Shabbat is a series of 7 psalms. It begins on page 130. This whole section was introduced into Jewish liturgy in the 16th century by the mystics of the city of Tzfat. And while we opened last week, and there are several settings to L'chunu Ranana and Shiru Adonai, this is one which will add in Psalm 96. So let me show you in advance how we will sing this. We opened last week with L'chunu Ranana. Basically, it's just that first paragraph sung several times on page 130. The words mean, "Come, let us sing joyously to Adonai, raise a shout for our rock and our deliverer." So that is sung in a variety of settings several times. And then we jump to Psalm 96, the opening. I think it's just the 4 lines on the top, right? On page 131 from Psalm 96. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash means sing unto God a new song. So we open with L'chunu Ranana, we jump to Shiru Ladonai on page 131, and just to confuse you, we jump back to 130 to L'chunu Ranana at the end. So Kabbalat Shabbat, the psalms and songs with which we welcome Shabbat, pages 130 and 131. L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, L'Adonai. L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, L'Adonai. Naria Letzor Yishenu, Mekadma Fana Betoda. Naria Letzor Yishenu, Bizmirot Naria Lo. L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, L'Adonai. L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana, L'chunu Ranana. Page 131. Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz. Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basru Miyom Liyom Yesh. 130. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena, l'Adonai. Page 135. The last paragraph of Hebrew on the page from the middle of Psalm 99. The words Romamu Adonai Eloheinu mean exalt Adonai our God and bow toward God's holy hill, for Adonai our God is holy. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romamu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. L'chadodi, a setting that is familiar to you. I know this as the Argentinian setting of L'chadodi, stanzas 1, 2, 5, and 9, pages 138 and 139. And when we reach stanza 9, not yet, when we reach stanza 9, on the bottom of 139, we rise, we face the entrance, and we welcome, symbolically, we welcome the presence of Shabbat into our lives. L'chadodi 138 and 139. Shemo tiferet v'litihilai yadalai lechadodim yadalai likrat kalam yadalai b'nei Shabbat nikam likrat Shabbat. Shabbat, lechu v'nelcha, ki mekor haberacha, merosh mikedem mesucha, sof Shabbat Tehillah, Yai Lai Lai, Yada La 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 Lechadolim, Yada La La Likrat Kalam, Yada La 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 B'nei Shabbat, Shabbat Nikah. Top of 139. I confess to you that while we are loving the vast majority of things in our young experience in this part of the world, Julie raised something that was tickling her, and now I too am a little frustrated. 1 month and several days ago, we left behind our home in Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey. Still for sale. Anybody wants it? Really help us out. Like to talk to you about it later. Beautiful pool in the back. Very, very close to Ocean City, New Jersey, Margate, Atlantic City. We saw the ocean a lot. We took an 8-day trip across the country. It was magnificent. It was vast. It was inspiring. And then we stopped here. Julie doesn't think we've gone coast to coast yet. We need to see the Pacific to complete that. We haven't done, but in honor of that, from Psalm 93 in English, the last non-indented paragraph on page 141 together. The ocean sounds Adonai. The ocean sounds its thunder. The ocean sounds its pounding. Above the thunder of the mighty waters, more majestic than the breakers of the sea is Adonai, majestic on high. Your decrees are indeed enduring. Holiness befits your house, Adonai, for all times. Shalom Aleichem, page 142. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Asharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Later tonight, I'm going to be sharing on this social action Shabbat. I'm going to be sharing my vision of social action and social justice in the context of Reform synagogues. So I'd like to look below the line here on page 143, the reading from my teacher, Lawrence Kushner, together. And so we understand that ordinary people are messengers of the Most High. They go about their tasks in holy anonymity, often even unknown to themselves. Yet if they had not been there, if they had not said what they said or did what they did, it would not be the way it is now. We would not be the way we are now. Never forget that you, too, yourself, may be a messenger, perhaps even one whose errand extends over several lifetimes. Chatzi Kaddish, page 144. Please rise. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba v'yamavid v'yivrach yichirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'meru Yehei Shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam lol me'almaya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei Dekudesha le'la min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata ta'amiran bi'alma. Baruchu, page 146. Remain standing, the bottom of page 149. This is an hour of change. Within it we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Baruch atah Adonai, ham'ariv aravim. Please be seated. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta baham v'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'aderech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha u'ksharatam leot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beinenecha u'chtavtam amezuzot beitecha uv'isharecha leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim le'elohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'elohim ani Adonai Elohechem emet. 157. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. Kifad Adonai et Yaakov, u'galomi el chazak mimenu, Baruch ata Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. In the handout, Hashkivenu, and one day. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomrei. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Zalei, I drown, me down, surrounds, know something wrong. All my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, there'll be no more wars. One day, one day, one day, one day, Ashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu L'Shalom, V'Amidenu Shomreinu L'Chaim. Ashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu L'Shalom, V'Amidenu Shomreinu L'Chaim. We turn to page 162 for this very familiar setting of Veshamru. Shabbat ledorot berit olam v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat lasot et haShabbat ledorot berit olam u'sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat lasot et haShabbat uvayom.
I did verse 2 instead of verse 1.
You did. Let's go on to the last one.
Okay.
Uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash Shabbat vayinafash v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat lasot et haShabbat ledorot berit olam. Just looking to see if we robbed them of any ets here, but no, there were in the first. We'll come back to it next week,
Yeah.
or we'll switch to Yismachu. Last week I was so pleasantly surprised to see the motion on et that I went back and asked if you knew what you were doing. I mean, if you knew what it meant or the origin was. We talked about it last week, so I'll skip it now. But I'm sure I will comment on your et movement again. Because it's Social Action Shabbat, I will once again use the introduction that I did last week. I'm going to the top words in English on 165, but before I do, very famously, after he marched with Dr. King, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, "When I marched at Selma, I felt as if my feet were praying. Pray as if everything depends on God. Act as if everything depends on you." The Amidah, the Tefillah. We begin on page 164. We rise and we face Jerusalem. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips and my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'nehem, L'ma'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham V'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומיתו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים, אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, קדושים בכל יום יעללוך הסלע, ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Continue in personal prayer. ויחולו השמיים וחוץ ויחול אלוהים ביום השביעי. ישבות ביום השביעי לקצור השמש. באמת יום השביעי. קדש אותו כבוא שבת וכל אשר בו. טהר לבנו וטהר לבנו. לך שתעבוד המלכים. צורכינו ונשנו ותעבוד, נודה לכם הספרתי עליו. שפתח ובורא לך ויום נסחש. You may be seated, page 178. Page 371. Mishaberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzhak v'Yaakov v'imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah v'yivarech v'yirapeh et hacholim ha'ela. God who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, send your blessing and healing, your comfort and your hope to all those who are in need of healing, all those who are isolated and alone, all those whose names I am about to share, and then the ones that you are about to share in a moment as well. We mention Sandy Lewin, Jerry Steinke, Ralph Bunn, Carrie Matthews, Marie Owen, Vinka Jarrett, Joel Kaplan, Barry Frankel, Olga Krimen, Jada Johnson, Barbara Beeman, Gail Feldstein, Phil Braverman, Gary Sobin, Pam Caldwell, Andy Lee, Rachel Mitchellberg, Michael Owen, Alan Gould, Delia Raskoff, and Mary Kessler. To these names which I have mentioned, are there any others that are in your hearts? Anyone else that you need healing? Baruch atah Adonai Rofech Olim. We praise you, O God, who helps us heal, who brings us comfort. Misheberach Avotenu Mekor habracha Le'imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha avotenu. Those in need of healing, refuah shlema, the renewal of body, renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Before I begin, I have something to say. I just wanted to add, first of all, thank you to Bruce and Susan for organizing the wonderful Shabbat dinner earlier today, and to Julie, who helped lead the blessing after the meals, and to all of you who came. I look forward to meeting many of you in the small groups that have been set up. It's a great way to meet a community, and I just want to say on Julie's behalf as well as mine, how grateful we are to be here. She has California plates on. We can return your Phillips head screwdriver now. She has it with her. We don't have licenses yet. That challenge is next week. But we're very happy to be with you. We're grateful to the wonderful hospitality all of you have extended. Jenny has been magnificent. tradition explicitly is not one which is only about our worship of God. No, instead, we are told from the earliest, from the outset, God expects our devotion to the divine to be expressed and manifest through our involvement with and our treatment of one another. Religion is not confined to services. Part of the point of worship is to remind us that we serve God in our daily lives, in our interactions, in our actual values. There's a word for how we interact with others. How human beings interact, what they use in that interaction is called power. And there's an entire field which is the study of how power is used. That field is called politics. Item and early memory, distorted by time. That is, what I remember and what I think I've now historically researched actually occurred may not be exactly right. But I remember this. I remember going to services at Temple Sinai of Washington, D.C. One of you has a cousin who's the cantor there now. Is that right? Somebody I was at dinner with. We went to services at Temple Sinai of Washington, D.C. I'd look up at the bima. I remember this happening more than once. In fact, it may only have been once. I'd say, Mom, where's the rabbi? Oh, he's in jail. Again. Marching for civil rights again. The lesson I learned is that the words we say in these halls walk with us into the world around us. Item. It is the late 1990s. We are in Buffalo. It is 11 p.m. on a Friday night. The phone rings. Julie answers. She hands me the phone with a puzzled and very worried sound in her voice. It's Bob Eisen. Bob Eisen is the Shomer Shabbat, traditional, Shabbat-observing, conservative rabbi down the block. Why is she alarmed? He wouldn't be making a phone call on Shabbat unless it was a true emergency. I take the phone, and Rabbi Eisen says, one of your congregants has just been shot. I step outside. I hear the helicopters whirling around. The Slepian family lived less than a quarter mile from our home. I'll tell you this story in much more detail on another occasion, but they didn't catch the guy for 5 years. They eventually found him in France. But some of you who are old enough may remember Bart Slepian, a physician, an OBGYN. He loved bringing babies into the world. But yes, on some occasion, he often tried to talk women out of this. He was a fertility specialist, for God's sake. But yes, on occasion, to serve women and save women's lives, he performed abortion. And he was killed for it. When I was in New Jersey, the second Shabbat that I was there, the Dobbs decision came down. Now, this is my second Shabbat here, but I'm still getting to know you, and this is an introductory sermon where I'm going to share a general vision of social action. I wanted to sort of share a general spiritual approach on that Shabbat in New Jersey, but the Dobbs decision had just come down. If I had not addressed women's rights, reproductive rights, and what Judaism and our tradition has to say about a very difficult topic that night, I would have been the only Reform rabbi in America. I would dare to say, my Canadian colleagues did that night, I would have been the only Reform rabbi in North America who wasn't talking about that topic. And yet, to this day, I heard complaints that that sermon was too political. I am not going into the content of that sermon here. We'll save that for another time, a class, or perhaps a sermon for another occasion. From my point of view, that was a moral issue addressed from the point of view of our spiritual tradition. Item from the East Coast earlier today. It is a phenomenon familiar to residents of California, but still somewhat new out east. People are having trouble breathing in Washington, D.C. It's not the reflecting pool, but because of something going on in the forests of Ontario. What a reminder. The whole world is connected. We are more a part of each other than apart from each other. I understand the instinct, the impulse to separate our lives into separate realms with boundaries between them. A sanctuary should be a To emphasize that point, I will, by the way, never forget an unexpected emotional response in a sanctuary in Chevy Chase, Maryland. It was entirely made of brick, except for a few randomly scattered, colorful stained glass pieces. Now, look, what I'm about to tell you is a tangent, but you've got one of these in every congregation. In that congregation, it was Jack Lowe. He looked at a retired pediatrician. He looked at the way that the random way that the colored glass was. Oh, that looks like pre-war Czechoslovakia. Thanks. Only you would come up with that. It was 2002, I believe, and snipers were terrorizing the county, randomly picking off people as they went about their lives, filling their cars with gas, exiting from a grocery store. At a tense time, I was shocked to hear that some of the kids in our religious school at the time expressed a feeling of security and safety in that sanctuary, surrounded by brick and with no clear glass looking outside. Now, we deal with security threats here. You've actually had more active ones in Sacramento than I did in the 4 years in my part of New Jersey, but other parts of New Jersey were less safe. I understand the issues of security. I commend you on your training and your attentiveness to detail, and I pray that all of that preparation is never needed again. Yet when we renovated the sanctuary in Maryland, light and openness and exposure were built in as part of the plan. It is, we discovered, right there in Jewish tradition. In the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Brachot, page 34, you remember that, right? I had to look it up too. It teaches that a synagogue must be built with windows. And yes, being able to look out into the world from the lobby counts. We're kosher here. The world comes in. And even in the gathering place of the Spirit, when we come together to look inside ourselves, we are expected to look out as well. From the founding moments of our Reform movement, this sense of working towards the betterment of the world was part of who we are and what we stood for. Even as the early reformers may have gone, my opinion here, a bit too far in de-emphasizing ritual, in not understanding the critical role that customs and ceremonies play in identity formation and group cohesion, I do think the revolution in that regard went too far in being anti-ritual. Nevertheless, our focus was on ethics in our lives, in our relationships, in our work, and in the society around us. But then how do we do this? We also believe that all are welcome here. We embrace diversity. I love the motto, we're here, where everyone is family. And yeah, some families, there are some blow-ups in some families, but everybody's got a crazy uncle, whatever his name is, right? We embrace diversity, and that includes not only diversity in personal practice, but also economic diversity. Some of us are very comfortable. Some of us live in small apartments. Some of us can't sell our house in New Jersey and are waiting to. But also racial makeup, egalitarianism, background, and diversity of viewpoint. How indeed do we take a stand and maintain an open stance? In some aspects of our work, this is obvious and easy. This is the area known as social action. To help feed the hungry, to lead a drive for school supplies. There are few who would object to the, everybody close your eye, raise your hand if you object to that kind of thing. Good, I didn't say any, right? Few who would object to these efforts, I assume, I hope. But there's a difference between social action and social justice. And Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, is about both. Social action is about treating symptoms. Social justice, on the other hand, is an attempt to treat causes. It involves not just aid, but also sometimes advocacy. What houses of worship are forbidden from doing, well, they're not forbidden anymore because, the Johnson Act is not being informed. But even if we're allowed to do it, I would never, stand up here and tell you who to vote for or endorse a candidate. That's political. Electoral politics, saying who to vote for or who not to vote for, that's political. Exploring the moral roots that our tradition takes. 36 times in the Torah it says, defend the orphan, speak up for the widow, shelter the homeless, give aid and comfort to those who are, be the voice for the voiceless. 36 times, it's serious. You can debate and discuss and disagree about how to do this. And in the days before politics was so very partisan, we could have really good discussions about the right way. But if your passion is to lift up the poor, if your commitment is to a better society, then the different visions of how to get there are legitimate kosher discussions. But when we attempt to address causes, that crosses into, it's not electoral, but that crosses into an arena which touches on what some would consider to be political. So again, how do we do this? What have Reform synagogues almost always done? How do we reach out without reading out? A number of years ago, when both of them were still alive, my father of blessed memory, who was one of the world's leading experts in the former Soviet Union, I have a copy of his book in my study, Ecocide in the USSR. I told him I would wait for the movie to come out. My father was very friendly with a quite prominent Jewish Republican. His name was Ambassador Max Kampelman. He was the negotiator on behalf of human rights to Helsinki. He was appointed by President Reagan. He later went on to write an actually quite good biography of President Reagan. And one day, are we recording this? We are. All right. Ambassador Kampelman was complaining about the sermons given by the rabbis of his very large Washington-based Reform congregation. You didn't hear me. And my father said, would you take a look at some of my son's sermons on some of his more controversial topics? He said, sure. They met for lunch the following week. And Ambassador Campbellman apparently said the following. He said, I don't necessarily agree with your son's views any more than I do with the sermons of my rabbis. So remember, by the way, I have 3 goals in a sermon. I want to touch your heart. I want to make you think, and I want to keep you awake. And I'll take 2 out of 3. So Ambassador Campbellman said, but he did something that my rabbis didn't do. They probably did, he just didn't. He acknowledged diversity. He took a stand but didn't read me out of the room. I felt like I was acknowledged. I don't think I've ever gotten such a great compliment. There are times to take a stand. When it's on something controversial, it's important to acknowledge. Not everybody shares that view. That is a story about what I might say, a letter I might sign, a position I might take, even occasionally a sermon I might give. That's about me. But what about you? What about the involvement, the agency, the activity of the congregation as a whole? I saw you. There's even a clip. I saw you holding up a Beth Shalom sign at the Pride March. Who decided? How did you do? What is good for you? But how does a congregation fairly come to that conclusion? I saw a restaurant in the Maryland area, I think it's spread beyond that, that I have taken the name from and used it as an acronym. The restaurant is called Kava. So I take this as an acronym. And if I was working with the board to develop a position on sort of when, look, if the Social Action Committee wants to go do something in the name of the Social Action Committee, that's one, but to take the banner and represent the congregation, that should be at least discussed by the leadership of the congregation. That's not one person's decision alone. So Kava stands for consensus. That's the first word. Look, we're Jews. We'll never have unanimity. You know the phrase as well as I do. 2 Jews, 3 opinions. It'll never be unanimous, but there are issues upon which there has been, at the time when we took a position in Maryland on behalf of the same-sex marriage ballot initiative, by the way, in Maryland, we were the first ones in the country to pass it. In California, you had it judicially imposed. But by citizen ballot initiative, we were the first. You know why we were the first? Because our polls closed 1 hour earlier than Maine. It was the same day, but we were first. So for the congregation to take a stand at that time, in that place, in that space, the consensus in the reform movement was we have 2 signs on our building in Maryland. One was Temple Shalom supports Israel, and the other is civil marriage is a civil right. That was about gay marriage. I got a lot of complaints about one of those signs, and not one of those complaints was about the gay marriage one. Israel's a topic for another time. Consensus. There are times when the moral moment meets you head on, and you just know this is a time to take a stand. The second one is authentic. I worked at one point he eventually became an ambassador as well on behalf of religious freedom, but I worked for the rabbi and attorney who was head of our Reform Movement Religious Action Center, David Saperstein. And I love him, I adore him. He's like one of the greatest figures in our movement, still to this day. But I remember he said at one point, the Torah clearly supports the Kennedy-McCain the McCain-Feingold campaign finance. He said, David, you got to make the case. You can convince me, but you got to make the case. Authentic means you go to the Jewish texts, you make the argument. Homosexuality is not an obvious, right? I found one copy in your library here. I wrote a sermon in the early 1990s, my very, very early days as a rabbi, called In God's Image, Judaism and Homosexuality, in which I wasn't the only one to do it, but I went back and I looked at the sources and I made the case for how being pro-same-sex marriage was an authentic expression of Jewish values. But you've got to make the case, authentic, consensus and authentic. Then V is value added. At that time, in that space, value added, if you said you were religious, somebody assumed you were anti-gay. To have a progressive voice in public from a congregation on gay rights issues was incredibly value added to the conversation. And finally, achievable. We'll switch issues for the moment. Well, in Maryland, it was a ballot initiative that was in November. I spoke to the congregation in the high holidays. When are the high holidays? A little before November, right? So it was a short time, focused effort, achievable. It's great if a board, congratulations, Ella, you just passed a resolution through your board. We're against world hunger, mazel tov. But like, okay, right? But consensus, authentic, value-added, achievable. That's a conversation I'd like to at least engage in, and then have a congregation proudly carry its banner on behalf of reproductive rights, on behalf of Darfur, on behalf of refugees, on action with SAC Act on the question. It doesn't take a position, I think, on like, you know, what the border should look like, but it does on how we humanely treat people once they are here. I mean, you know, you don't have to be for open borders to be a decent human being. Kava. One of the political issues I took a stand on is something you have here as well, on behalf of refugees. At a Kol Nidre sermon in 2015, I called on the congregation to form a refugee response team. And as you probably know very well, there are different agencies in different regions that handle it. In some places it's Catholic Charities. In some place it's HIAS. You know what HIAS used to stand for? Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. You know what they stand for now? HIAS. Its organization just means HIAS. It says we used to help refugees because they were Jews. Now we help refugees because we are Jews. In our area, it was the Lutheran Social Services. And we met at the airport a Syrian family and welcomed them to the country and set up their apartment and took care of them for a year. Matt has spoken with me about his connection with an Afghan family here. We were a Jewish congregation working with a Christian social service agency to welcome a Muslim family to this country. I've never been more proud of anything that we've done. When I was first ordained, Julie accused me of quoting the philosopher Martin Buber in almost every sermon. And then about 12 years later, when I calmed down a bit and didn't do that, she said, I haven't heard you quote Martin Buber in a while. I just unpacked my Buber and Heschel books, but I still didn't unpack them in time to find the exact quote. But I will never forget reading Martin Buber when he once said, the people, he probably said men, the people of the Bible were sinners like ourselves, but there is one sin they did not commit, our arch sin. They did not dare confine God to one area of religion and say, beyond these bounds is the realm of science and education and the political world, and you are confined just to one area. Our tradition inspires. We're not looking to impose, but our tradition inspires us to walk in the world with the values that we learn and hear and teach. From Pirkei Avot, the words are on page 645. Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the ancestors. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. It is not on you, it is not incumbent upon you to finish the work, hamlacha ligmor. Velo, but, velo ata ben chorin, but you are not free, lehivatel mimena, to ignore it, to desist from it. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin lihivatel mimena.
Shabbat Shalom. I'm Lori Nalangan, and I'm going to do announcements tonight. Thank you, Rabbi, for leading us through tonight's service. And thank you to our ONEG sponsors, Bob and Holly. If you're interested in sponsoring an ONEG, please reach out to Jenny Jeffrey. And as always, shout out with gratitude to our security team. Thank you. And thank you to our CBS band tonight. Torah study will be returning August 8th in person here at the synagogue at 9:30. So, who likes basketball? Oh, I mean baseball. Who likes baseball? Baseball. Basketball. Okay, join your CBS family at a fun-filled evening at the ball game. Rabbi Feshbach and other congregants will be visiting Sutter Health Park in West Sacramento this Saturday night.
Go Nationals.
Go Nationals! For the Athletics versus Nationals game. If you have not already purchased tickets, they can be found on any third-party site, such as SeatGeeks and Ticketmaster. Purchase in sections 120 and 122. 121 is best. If you forget all that, I can tell you that later. But if you want to sit near the other CBS friends, the nearby beer garden provides much-needed shade until it reaches the seating area. Please reach out to Max Morrison right there if you have any questions or want to coordinate seats. And there's some flyers out in the foyer. So please, I hope you all join us next week on Friday, July 24th at 7 p.m. for Shabbat services. Social Action Committee is partnering with Carmichael Hart in collecting backpacks and school supplies for homeless and marginally housed students of the San Juan Unified School District. There's a basket in the foyer for the collections, so please remember to bring your donations when you come for services, and we'll be collecting the donations through the end of July. We're also, I'm very excited to announce, offering a 3-part course called A Taste of Judaism, Are You Curious? So there are flyers out in the foyer. The food fair is fast approaching, and it's never too soon to think about latkes. This year's food fair will be bringing back latkes, and there are some cooking dates scheduled for late August. There is a flyer in the foyer with more details. Please consider joining us. And this year, the food fair is back where we had it last year at the Scottish Rite on H Street. And the date is November 8th. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you. One more thing, since I was not quite able to organize a Tisha B'Av service here, observance for the 9th of Av, a little bit of background on it is also on a flyer in the foyer, but we've been invited to Mosaic Law Congregation this coming Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Remember that it is a fast day in Judaism, so there's no oneg afterwards. But the observance of Tisha B'Av in the traditional conservative service this Wednesday, but they have the same security concerns we do, so you would need to RSVP here to Jenny. The email is here in order for us to give them a list of names so they can know who is coming as well. What? We need the names a couple days before. I meant to say by July 20th. So Shabbat Shalom. Our service continues with Aleinu. Aleinu is on the bottom of page 598. 586. As we continue with Aleinu, please rise. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tet gedula liotzer b'reishit, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'gohor aleinu k'chol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu, shehu noteh shamayim v'yosed haaretz, u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim mima'al, u'shchinatu zo, b'kol he'meromim, hu Eloheinu einod, emet malkeinu efes ulato, kakatuv b'torato, v'yadata hayom, hashevota el levavecha, ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim, b'shamayim mimal, ve'al ha'aretz, mitacham ein od. 591, v'ne'emar Adonai lemelech al kol ha'aretz, hayom hahu yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo I'll get the echo eventually. It has long been my custom, and I believe it is the custom of this congregation as well, as we reach the name of a loved one, should you choose to do so, should you feel comfortable doing so, we ask that you rise so that we may know that you are here in mourning and in memory. Then we will, as is the custom in almost all Reform synagogues, rise as a congregation as a whole for Kaddish Yatom, for the mourner's Kaddish itself. I know, my sermon was long. I've gone over time. They'll get shorter until the high holidays. There are stars whose radiance is visible on this earth, though they have long since ceased to exist. There are people whose light and whose warmth continue to shine for us, though they are no longer among us. These stars which shine in the dark of the night, they light the way for humankind. We remember at this time those of our congregation's beloved whose yahrzeit occurs on this Shabbat. Solomon Abulafia, Anna Bagun, Marlene Bauer, Albert Biren, Helen Biren, Myrtle Brewer, Amy Bromett, Dr. Harry E. Cantor, Harold Cohen, Fishel Cornfield, Julie de Bevois, Belle Fried, Louis Friedson, Bernice Glassmeyer, Judy Hoffman, Ida Hyman, Char Jeffries, Daniel Korn, Vera Korobkin, Nancy Latin, Marcia Malkin, Philip Newman, Sheila Harfield Parrish, Harry Pastkan, Marcia Pell, Emma Ronquillo Nalangan, Sydney Spanner, Rose Young, Rose C. Zaret. During this year of mourning, Gudrun DeLutz, Rabbi Joseph Melamed, Mariam Fay, Faith Wilcox, Leo Sender, Barbara Sender, Meredith Rosenberg, Dean Meyer, Eli Davis, Beryl Harriet Schwartz, Jack Bernstein, Marsha Mayton, B. Buter, Christy Rosenberg, Bill Manchico Rozelle, Laura Brath. Is there anyone else here to say Kaddish for someone whose name I did not? Thank you. Or any of the names I may have mispronounced? The memories of all of our loved ones are with us. Our griefs and sympathies are mingled as we turn now to page 598, and we rise as a congregation for Kaddish Yatom, for the mourner's Kaddish prayer itself. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemeh Rabba, be'alma divrach cherutei v'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbam v'rach le'olam olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudusha p'richu. La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Uya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn in this congregation, and comfort all the bereaved among us and wherever they may be, all those who are suffering the pain of loss everywhere. And together, let us say, Page 643. Kol ha'olam kulo, the whole entire world. Gesher tsar ma'od is a very narrow bridge. V'hayikar, the most important thing, lo lefached klal, is not to be afraid. Kol ha'olam kulo, Gesher tsar me'od, Gesher tsar me'od, Gesher tsar me'od, Kol ha'olam kulo, Gesher tsar me'od, Gesher tsar me'od. Ah Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you. Ishkach.